morning. This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Hi, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas, and today we are discussing everything from dizzy directors to working with jerks on Light Talk.
Working with jerks?
Working with jerks. Oh,
are you talking about working with us?
With Illumin mentions, we are not the jerk. You know what? There's a difference between a temporary jerk, which we all are sometimes, and certified jerks. We are never certified. I've been a temporary jerk, I'm sure.
Yeah, we've all been temporary jerks, but I'm an actual certified public nuisance. And this is a long story that I'm not going to go into right now, but I actually have a certification as being a public nuisance long ago. And this is David in Long Beach, California. If you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. So, you know what this is? Episode uno.
111. And don't you have some news about like downloads or something? Aren't we like still popular, which is amazing?
The last 2 months, we hit the 6,000 number twice.
Wow.
6,500 the second month, 6,000 the first month. So I don't know what's going on.
And I think Steve said that we're closing in on how many, Steve, on the Facebook?
We're knocking on the door of 2,000 Facebook followers. You know, we're getting 5 to 10 people a week. That number is growing. So, some people.
Not bad for a niche. We are a niche, but boy, we're doing okay.
It's funny, I was listening to old episodes of Car Talk, again, which I love doing. And there was one day we first started to go to the podcast, and it was very interesting what they were talking about, because these are two guys that basically did everything on the radio. It was an NPR show.
Right.
It was a radio show before podcasts. And they were up to like episode 1,919. So we are only at episode 111.
We're babies.
So it's a long way to go. But anyway, welcome to 111. And we have some news, and then we'll get started after the news. First, Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about how Design Showcase East went?
Well, we're in our 17th year of presenting graduate students and BFA students to the New York market. We show their portfolios. We have room for about 30 people at the Alvin Ailey Studios. It was a good showing. People came, had a good time. What can I say? We have a couple hundred guests who come. A number of people were hired right off the floor, so it's kind of a combination Welcome to New York job fair. And I just want to remind everyone that coming up in June, UCLA will be presenting Design Showcase West, which is certainly a spectacular event. I encourage you to go see that.
That's right. That's June 1st. But boy, that's great, Steve. And as you know, I was there last year. It was a fantastic event. The Alvin Ailey studio is beautiful. Great place to highlight the students' work. And I'm really happy to hear that so many were successful in landing some gigs. That's really, really important. And then finally, we're going to talk about, before we get started, a little Game of Thrones finale action happened yesterday. And we were all pretty excited about that. At least I was. I don't think these two guys watch it, but I certainly did. And I really enjoyed it. I think they've sort of come back and wrapped up the series pretty well. So congratulations to the showrunners and everyone involved in that show. Although, I don't know if you guys know, but a few weeks ago, there was a mistake. Someone left a Starbucks coffee cup on the set, and it actually made it to the final airing of the show.
I'll see your coffee cup, and I will raise you a plastic bottle of water.
That's what I was going to say.
Go for it.
It happened again. It happened again in one of the final scenes when all the lords of Westeros are there trying to decide who's going to be king. Sure enough, by one of the lords' feet is a plastic water bottle. And I don't know, that's pretty sloppy. It's amazing to me, especially after they did it once. But, I think that there's a reason. I think they did this intentionally because people are getting so damn serious about Game of Thrones, me included, is that we forget that it's just a damn TV show. So I think they're leaving these little mistakes
to remind you that it's just fake.
Remind you it's fake. It's only a television show, for God's sake. So anyway, very, very funny. So hey, Steve has our first listener question.
Yes, it comes all the way from Salt Lake City. A young lady by the name of Brianne, and she says, I have a director who constantly changes his mind. He will look at the cue I have created, and he says he likes it. Then the next day at rehearsal, he says that the cue did not work, and he never approved it. I want to please him, but he keeps changing his mind. Well, welcome to tech. Welcome to dress. Welcome to preview. You know, you might as well just paint a target on your back. I mean, you're a moving target at these things. I think what you're going to find at tech and dress and preview, we come to it every night with a fresh set of eyes and a fresh set of ears, and we're seeing and hearing things, noticing things that we didn't notice. You know, the costume designer came up to me during dress a few nights ago and said, "What did you think of Bob's brown shoes?" I got rid of those black shoes and put some brown shoes on him. My response was, "Bob's wearing shoes?" Your director is looking at things on the stage that he has to look at. And so maybe now, the next day, he's actually taking the time to look at the light cue with some serious thought behind it. Just what can I tell you? Change is what we do as lighting designers. Mm-hmm. We're looking, all of a sudden actors speed up, they come up to pace, and the dialogue changes, and all of a sudden our cue time has to change. They slow down, they change their blocking, at the request of the director. Again, there's no villains here. People are coming together at these events to put the show together. And I would say you have to ask yourself the question, does it get better? If it's getting better, then I wouldn't worry about it. If you think it's getting worse, then maybe you sit down and chat with the director after the show to figure out how you can do a little bit more pre-production work and come up with a more consistent approach to how tech and dress are going to go.
Well, that's a good answer.
That's a pretty good answer. Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it pretty well, Steve. That's true. Managing change is what we do.
Yeah, change is everything.
And there's something just what Steve has said. I just want to maybe add a little bit to is that it is an evolution. I mean, it's a living art form. It's not like we're painting the thing with a canvas and in our studio and then we're done. It's dynamic. It's living beings on stage making art. And so you sort of have to be, we get all excited about how great light boards are and how great the technology is and how we can change the color so fast and easy. Well, why do you think we want that? Okay. It's not just because the technology is cool. It's because it serves our purposes in a dynamic environment. So be competent enough to sort of be comfortable to adjust. Now, of course, there's a line between somebody who's just out of control and somebody who is, like Steve says, just noticing it for the first time and just wants to make it better. And they are looking at a lot of different things. I know directors who say, look, after tonight, I'm not going to be looking at the lights anymore. I'm going to be looking at costume, or I didn't focus on that. Or sometimes you might have to ask and say, please focus on this aspect and tell me if you're comfortable with it. But it's a very challenging thing that we do. And you have to sort of just ease into the way of work that is the theater.
Look, it's all jazz. And you can't do jazz if you're not going to change. You're not going to evolve. Yep. And that's what the beauty of theater is evolution. And the lighting designers who get hired all the time are the ones who can change and evolve easily, painlessly, and do it quickly. Yeah. And that is really what's going to make or break you in your career. Now, it's funny because when I first got to this school about 21 years ago, I had inherited some graduate students, and I sat down with them and I asked them if there was anything that you would change about the program or things you don't like about the program. I want to know, because I was building this program. It was going to be a new program for them. And their first complaint, this is a group of lighting designers, was, well, we were expecting you to ask us this question, and we all want a policy to be invoked in our department that after first dress rehearsal, all the light cues are frozen.
Why?
They were serious.
I know, but why?
Because they didn't want to continue to work.
No, I'm sort of like saying it's a rhetorical
they
question.
They didn't get it. They didn't. They don't understand what theater's about. I mean, the actors change. The blocking changes. Sometimes big production numbers change. Everything changes in the theater. And that's the beauty of theater. And I told them, I said, you guys have it backwards. I understand where this is coming from. Instead of like saying, well, I still have to keep on doing this work, and why can't we freeze it, live in this environment? You've got to embrace it. You got to embrace the way the art works, especially as a lighting designer. So, I just think that it's a state of mind you have to be in.
Well, I'm in agreement with all of that, but I'll just take a little bit of a slightly contrary. And I think at a certain point, perhaps after final dress, you say, the show, I'm done. Okay. If you're going back now, previews or something else, but if it's your opening, at some point you do have to let it go. one of my favorite quotes, that no piece of art is ever truly finished. There are just interesting places to stop. And I think by the after final dress, that's a good place to stop. Unless there's some crisis, or unless there's something that somebody has a brilliant stroke and they go, wouldn't it be great if we do this and this and this? And you're opening tomorrow night and everybody goes, you know what? That really would make the show great. Let's do it. That's fine too. But I think there are interesting places to stop.
But you know something, Stan, how would you feel? Like, let's say you're very happy with the show and you just did final dress and the director comes up to you after final dress and says, you know, I know it's late, but I really think that we need to change that cue. Would you say it's Frozen? Because if
no,
that's right.
No, I wouldn't. And I wouldn't because I would really have to. Now, maybe when I was young, I would have had a different response. At this stage in my life, if I could see that what the director was suggesting, or I felt also that the cue really wasn't everything it could be, and the amount of pain it was going to take to do it, if it's pushing buttons on a console and the stage manager was comfortable, if I'm not changing the call, if I'm changing the call, that maybe you want to have the stage manager involved. But I wouldn't just reject that out of hand. If we've had a good relationship and it's a good collaborative experience and we can make the show better, I might. I would keep an open mind.
So you would actually tell director no, unless you agreed with the change. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not. No, I'm pretty much a good soldier. I will pretty much go with the director.
Yeah.
I still think the director is the captain of the ship, you know, and I respect the position. So no, I wouldn't. That would be very hard pressed to say no.
Now, again, I just don't think there's a frozen time. I mean, there's shows that I've been working on, and I'm sure you guys as well, where, you know, it's running for weeks and then you get a call from the stage manager. The stage manager says, you know, this transition's not working anymore because the actors have sped it up, the crew's moving faster. Would you mind if we changed the count a little faster? Sure, of course. I mean, that's what a good stage manager does. But it gets to a point where if you're off doing another project and the producer comes in and says, you know, we're gonna cut this production number, we're putting a different production number in, then you're going to your daily rate. Then that's something else. That's totally different.
That's something else. That kind of ties into the next question. Nigel from London wants to know, what do you do when your client keeps saying, quote, just one more thing, end quote? So this is different for me than a creative process where you make a discovery in the evolution and you all agree that making a change, even if it's at the last minute, is really going to make the thing better. That's different. We've already just covered that subject. Here, I think it's something else. I think he's getting at something else, and I could be wrong, but I think he's getting at adding on to the scope of work is what I think he's getting at. So my notes are like this. So you have to have boundaries. Now, in your personal life and in your professional life. Now, if those boundaries can be like a balloon, they can expand, you know, a little bit from what you agreed to. They could contract a little bit and you might end up not working as hard as you thought. So that's sort of a little bit of malleableness. But then there's a point where the balloon breaks, where they've gone asked beyond your boundaries, or, you know, you're not doing anything and you're phoning it in, which is not good either. So you sort of need to know what those boundaries are. And I've even watched young students this year who were being asked to do certain things, mature young students who said to somebody on the team, where they basically put their foot down and laid a clear boundary, says, no, that's not my priority right now. That's going to have to wait because this is my priority. And I was very proud of that. So I do think you have to know what your boundaries are. And you have to communicate them in a respectful and professional manner. The other thing is, I think when you're dealing with somebody like that and you've dealt with them before, you sort of have to be explicit in your contract. Now, you can't cover everything, but the contract can be fairly explicit and hold yourself and everybody else to those explicit scope of work. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be reasonable, right? So you've got to have a judgment on your own of what is reasonable. Can I work a few more? I'm doing a project right now that I'm going to lose money on just because of the amount of time I've had to put in. And I'm now working with somebody to help me through this complication. I put in way more time than I should have to. I could be really angry about it, but I'm turning that lemon into lemonade because of the way I'm working with the company that didn't provide appropriate equipment and is having problems. And there's a certain level of embarrassment that's happening towards me because of this, but I'm working through it. So my client's not asking for one more thing, but I am expanding my scope because my reputation is connected to it. So I think it's a judgment call on your own. But if it's so bad that it's really a chronic problem, then you very politely, hopefully after this last project, you can leave it without burning a bridge. And just the next time you get that phone call, you can politely decline.
Yeah, I'm starting to do more architectural work these days. And what I'm starting to find is that this comes up, I'm on my second project, so this has come up a second time. And I'm just being careful to explain what a change order is to a client.
Sure.
And how that impacts budget and how that impacts the contractors who are doing the work. So I'm trying to get everyone in the room and just simply be honest. And if the client's willing to pay for it and we can work it into the schedule, that's great. If they can't pay for it and they can't work it into the schedule, that's fine too. Occasionally where I see this happening in the theater world is mostly in the amateur world. And that's where the theater doesn't want to tell you what the project really entails. So,
Right.
They conveniently forget to tell you that there are, 107 Christmas tree lights that have to be embedded in the floor. Or, once you get that done, they go, oh, by the way, we need the third electric moved a couple feet to take care of a drop that's coming in. It's almost like they don't want to tell you, and it's because they're afraid to tell you. And I encourage them, just tell me everything up front so we can plan our workflow a little bit easier. I mean, there's no foul here. Just be honest with everyone about what you want rather than keep kind of dribbling one more thing at a time every other day.
That's funny. So in architecture world, it's just one more thing. And in the theater world, it's, oh, by the way.
Oh, by the way.
Oh, by the way.
Can I add a couple of things to that? Because Steve hit on a couple of really interesting points. One, for those folks out there who haven't worked in architecture or construction, they may not know what a change order is. So maybe I'll give a brief definition of that. And the other thing that I wanted to add is that the architecture world has a very codified methodology for how they go through a construction process. And I've been teaching my students that process and the phases of work. And I really think, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this to all the theater people out there, that we should copy them. We should adopt the architectural construction process methodology, not to the degree that they do, but conceptually, because we already do it. We just don't use the same words, and we don't have the sort of the discipline to stick with it. So let me just say change order is when a change in a process needs to be made. Usually they occur after something is in construction and is being implemented, and it was something that either got caught in a set of drawings after they have been reviewed and there's a change required, which would mean there's going to be a fee associated with it for the engineer or the designer to make the drawing changes and update everybody, or it's in the construction process where something is realized, shoot, we didn't see that, we didn't catch that, or it's not working the way we anticipated, we're going to make a change. And then that order is issued usually by the manager or the construction manager, and it does have a fee because there's time involved, or you're returning equipment and changing equipment. So change orders are to be avoided because they have a cost to them. In theater, it's similar too. A call can be extended. You can go into overtime. But I do think there's something valuable about what they call programming, or we call research, what they call schematic planning, which we might call a floor plan, which they call design development, which we sort of do the same thing after schematic is approved, what they call construction documents, what we call working drawings, what they call bid documents, which are the same in commercial theater, and then construction administration, the same as the people who manage the process. It's very similar, and I think we actually do what they do, but it's not organized across our industry. It's different everywhere you go. And I think there would be value in that. I know you don't think it'll ever happen, David, but I think it would actually make the theater do its work better.
This is from Pam in Miami. When do you take a chance specifying new and unfamiliar equipment on a show? Well, the quick answer here is I don't. Because I always do research on the equipment. Now we all use new equipment all the time, but there are ways of doing research. I wouldn't just blindly use a new moving light or a new controller or whatever. I would not specify something unless I was pretty sure that it was the right tool for the job. Yes, we do have to make compromises. Sometimes I'll be doing a show in a city and they don't have the equipment that I want, but they do have another type of moving light, another brand, another manufacturer that they do have, and I may never have used. So what do? Well, you don't just order it and on someone's word saying, oh yeah, this does everything a Mac Aura will do. No, that's, even though you do trust people, you want to see it for yourself. So if you're living in a large city, like I live in Los Angeles, usually there are rental houses that will have this equipment. Or you can even call up the manufacturer, and if you have any sort of status, they may even send you a piece of equipment for you to try out. But you really need to try it out. Sometimes you can go on the web and you can look at their demo, and it's a video demo of the equipment. But again, remember, you don't know if what you're seeing is exactly what the light will do. So you got to be really, really, really careful. So I avoid it. I really do avoid it unless I have my hands on that piece of equipment, or I know somebody that I really trust. Like I think I asked Steve. I think we were I was able to use a new Verilight piece of equipment. And I originally spec'd out, I believe it was a clay packy piece. And I asked Steve, hey, will this Verilight do what this clay packy will do? And Steve said, absolutely. And I trusted him, and he was right. But again, that's something you got to be really, really careful about.
Well, it's a career ender.
Yep.
I mean, you can't take something that, I don't know, you read about it on an internet forum. I mean, if you don't know what the equipment is capable of doing, and what its strengths and weaknesses are, you're just asking for trouble. You're just asking for trouble. If you're not familiar with how the color mixing on it works, or how the effects or the animation wheels work, and you get into the theater, I have heard this a lot, particularly from young designers, and they blame the equipment. They should be blaming themselves for taking that piece of equipment that they knew nothing about and sticking it on the show. How many times have I heard, if I were using a Grand MA, it'd be finished now. Or if I were using a Geo, I'd be finished with my work now. Well, why didn't you spec the damn Grand MA or the Geo? Why did you take, brand X console? Well, everyone said it did the same thing. Well, buyer beware. Never, never. You'll just walk away looking bad, and people will think less of you, particularly producers, where the bottom line is important.
Yeah, don't do it. Do your research, or even use a piece of equipment that may not be exactly what you wanted, but that you know how it works and you know what it can do.
Right.
And you can sort of compromise a little bit that way. You'd feel a lot better off and lose a lot less sleep by using the equipment you know.
I'm zoning in on the word unfamiliar equipment, and I think that's what you guys were getting at the end of your comments, that it may not be the quality. It could be a decent piece of equipment. You just might not know it. So I tell my students, don't learn something new on an actual show. Use what you know. I'll give an example. This spring, we were going to use Hedgehog, which is a perfectly reliable piece of equipment on a show, but we don't usually use the Hog in our main stage space. We're ETC Net, and we were using more universes than we've ever used before. And I had a little bit of trepidation. The student wanted to use it, and that student had some familiarity. But we reached the point where I said, you know what? It's going to. I don't think you're as prepared as you need to be in the first place. And then going in there with a console you're not really that familiar with, not a good idea. And in hindsight, it was a good thing we made that change and we went with what we knew for that production, because it had inherent issues that had nothing to do with that piece of equipment, and it would have just made it worse. So good points, everybody. Well, you are listening to Light Talk with Stan, Steve, and David, and we are the Lumen Brothers. And this week, Light Talk is sponsored by the CWA. That's the Communications Workers of America. And they're coming to us today with a grand old product that everybody needs. Do you struggle until your hair falls out with technical problems? Do you irrationally insist on trying everything you can until you run out of ideas or you break your device? Are you so stubborn that you would sit there useless before you ask for help? Well, man, oh man, has the CWA got an invention for you. It's called the phone. That's right. It actually works. No vaporware, no Ethernet, no satellite connection. This baby runs on copper wire and good old voltage. Just pick up the phone, dial a few numbers, and you'll have a direct, duplex, real fine conversation with a living, breathing expert on the technology you're struggling with. What a concept! A phone! This is not a smartphone. This is just a normal T-E-L-E phone. A telephone. Manufacturers offer a special bonus. 800 numbers. The call is actually free. So pick up the phone. Phones work. You've heard of F2F, face-to-face. This is V2V, voice-to-voice. Get into the 21st century and pick up the phone. Try it. You'll love it. Your favorite manufacturers are just waiting for you to pick up the phone. Available in Princess, desktop rotary, or a light-up push button. Or if you've got some spare coin to blow, get one in a booth. A phone booth. The audio might not be high fidelity, but you'll understand every word. So pick up the phone from the Communication Workers of America, a division of Bell Labs, the folks who invented nearly everything, including the phone. And now, back to Light Talk.
All right, so for those who want to know what a phone sounds like, just listen to episode 110.
There you go.
where we had Dawn Chang. By the way, wasn't that a great interview?
Absolutely.
It was. I've been listening to the Carpenters ever since. I've been listening to
the Carpenters.
Yeah. And reading about them, too.
By the way, speaking of the Carpenters, I put another link up of a Tonight Show episode that they played on, and Cubby O'Brien was playing drums, and he had a drum solo, and he was great. So, yeah, there you go, Cubby O'Brien. Okay, so those ducks in the background tell us that once again, it's time for Let's Talk About segment. And today, since, we are all out of school, and we all have the summer to ponder our futures in higher education, we thought that we'd talk about what the future is for theater design education.
I think it's just simply more broad-based. I'm about to graduate my first costume designer who is interested in working in the virtual world. She is interested in anime and in gaming and creating costumes in that world. We have a school here, part of the Meadows, called the Guild Hall, and they take it's a 2-year program. They take a total of 60 MFAs in, 30 year 1, 30 year 2. And it is a 2-year school in gaming. And occasionally we teach in that program, we teach scenery, lighting, costume to people who are creating games, helping them create a world. So I think the future of design is simply broader and broader and broader. I mean, we had this, you could have had this question, I guess, at the turn of the century. What's the future of design? Well, that future clearly was film. And then a little bit later, that future was television. So I think as we keep discovering entertainment and industrial applications that require visual artists, then that's where our future is.
I think Steve nails it. I think it's true. The same here at UF. Since I've been here 20 years, when I first came, they had founded something called the Digital Worlds Institute in our college, the DWI, driving while intoxicated, not really, but Digital Worlds, is that place where they do the gaming and the code writing, and they do green screen, and they do all that. It's true. And I've been promoting architectural lighting and fields beyond the stage in my career since I've been doing this. So I think Steve's absolutely right. It's going to get broader. They're applying what we do in the foundational work in the live stage translates. And I hear it from engineers and architects all the time. Everything is theater now. Everything has a theater sort of mentality about it, which is great for us. When we started, I think we all felt lucky if we worked. And now I think if you pick up the skills, you can apply it in so many different industries and it will continue to grow. So it's a good time, I think, to be going into it. I used to discourage students from it, and now I see no reason to, because there's a lot of people working and the applications are broadening all the time.
Yeah, I think that everything's changing now. I really do. I had this very interesting discussion with one of my colleagues last week where we were talking about the future of theater curriculum. And we were actually talking about, do we really need to teach Shakespeare anymore? Because students are not interested in that content. And he said, well, I could take Game of Thrones and relate that directly to Shakespeare. I said, absolutely. Sure. I mean, you could absolutely do that. But then wouldn't the content be Game of Thrones instead of Shakespeare?
I don't know. I'm a fan of the classics, but I do like when they become contemporarily relevant.
You're also from a different era, like we are.
Yeah. But classics are classics for a reason.
Well, who's to say Game of Thrones will be a classic in 10, 15, 20 years?
It might be. It may be.
You hear this at IRTA all the time. And, what are you looking for in a student? And, I interview people. I'm a holistic program. So already 90% of the people who are at IRTA don't want to come to my program. But then I also talk to people who say, I am going to light Broadway musicals. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the key phrase there is, I'm going to light a musical, or I am going to do rock and roll. And they're simply, at this point in their career, they're not interested in a drama, or they're not interested in ballet, or they're not interested in architecture. I am going to light a musical. And anything else they see as a waste of time. Some of them you think, okay, you probably can pull this off. And others you look at and go, you're just a little lost lamb, and you're going to be eaten, and you have no idea because of everything you've decided you're not going to do. You're actually going to the all-you-can-eat buffet and getting a plate of peas and calling it a day. And I have nothing against peas, but I'd like a few potatoes and some corn and maybe some fish along with it. I think the specialization thing is inevitable. But I also think we have coming up an interesting interview with Elaine McCarthy. And I think she's anything but a specialist. She happens to do projections very, very well, but there's a lot of stuff that comes into making her designs something that are noteworthy. So I think that interview, I think it's 115 maybe. And I would say the same thing, the interview with Ken Billington coming up. It's a lot to be a designer. You have a lot of things you're thinking about and looking at and reading and researching, and how this whole kind of, hobo stew comes together to make you what you are is interesting.
I agree with Steve. I think of the Elie Kazan quote when he was asked, what do you have to know to be a great director? And he said, everything. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but you have to be sort of conversant in everything. And I think the same can be said to designers. You don't have to be an expert in all the fields, but you sort of have to have a fundamental understanding of all of them because you're working with them. You're working you make art out of the world, and it's to limit yourself. It's okay to have a certain sort of where maybe your talent is more profound than others, but that doesn't mean you turn yourself off to the other things. I think that's defeatist.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys on this one. My point is that I think content has to change to get the students engaged. They're not engaged by the classics anymore. And I'm speaking generally. There are exceptions to everything.
Maybe it has more to do with the teacher than the content.
No, it has to do with the content. I've already done, and I'm sure you guys have done the same. You bring certain content in for them to study. Some things they're turned on by, and some things they're not. They come in with a natural resistance to it.
I'm going to make a joke. I had a natural resistance to raw clams and oysters when I was first introduced to them. And now I love raw clams and oysters. Sometimes you do have to be a little force-fed to appreciate something.
I don't think that's how these students like to be treated.
Yeah, well.
It's a different time, Stan. It really is, man. And I just think that a lot of students, if they're not interested in something, they will not have that type of discipline or open-mindedness to realize that it's for their own good.
And that is the problem, and therein lies the problem. You just nailed it.
Yeah, well, the way things have changed and things are going from what I see is that if you don't cater to that, you're not going to be around for that much longer.
That may be true anyway.
So it really doesn't matter.
That's true regardless.
All right, Steve, that's our last question of the day.
And it is Tammy from Charlotte. I am working with a scenic designer on a school show, and he is very stubborn and uncollaborative. He does not answer any of my emails and does not listen to any of my suggestions at design meetings. When I ask him why, he says, "Why would I listen to a lighting designer?"
Good question.
I'm so frustrated. Help. All right, Tammy.
Oh,
I've got three things to say. Maybe you're just not very talented. You might be bad. Your ideas might be terrible. So that's a possibility. Now, the second possibility, the set designer might just be a jerk. He might just be a
certified.
He might be a certifiable jerk.
It could be temporarily jerky.
And there's nothing you can do about that. The third thing, which is probably, I suspect, the answer, is your set designer is territorial. And so, I thought about this a little bit. I have worked with, I think, two. I've been thinking about this. I think I have worked with two really good set designers. A gentleman by the name of Ron Keller and Russell Parkman. And those guys are the most generous, open set designers I've ever worked with. I'm getting ready to do a new sci-fi play that opens in the fall with Russell. And I have been in his office through the whole design process. He's been taking me through the set, asking me what I think of it. He's just open. And Ron was always very open. So they were not territorial. Now, that didn't mean that they took every suggestion I threw out. And it didn't mean that they also didn't have some suggestions for me. But there was an open, and I felt a good-hearted and honest conversation that had gone on with both of these set designers. So I think probably what you have to do is figure out how the two of you can find a common vocabulary. And I know this is simplistic, but if it's someone you're working with a lot, you said at the school, so maybe you've got to go out and get a slice of pizza. Maybe you have to go out and get a cup of coffee. Maybe the two of you have to get to know each other, because part of these conversations happen when you trust the other person. If he has no reason to trust you, then he never is. And so he's always going to think you're a bad designer. But you can probably prove him wrong, and you can probably prove that you deserve his trust and respect. It's just going to take time. It's just going to take time, unless he's a jerk. Then nothing's going to help you. You just have to get through it as best you can and decide what battle you want to fight. And if you want to work with him again, frankly.
Steve, you mentioned this word generosity about Russell and Ron. I think that's a really key word. We should be generous with our information, with our process, with our flow. And I can remember a couple of set designers in my experience who, for whatever reasons, didn't want to share their drawings, didn't want to share the information. And it was like, and I think some of it was youth. Some of it was, well, I'm not finished with it yet. Well, that's okay. I'm not grading it. We're not judging it. We just want to be able to go back and forth as it's developing. So I hope that gets better for you, Tammy. I hope that you're not stuck with somebody like that.
Yeah, and if all else fails, take them out back and slip them a Mickey. Because
that's from another era too, David.
Slipping a Mickey. Right. I don't know, man. I think a lot of it has to do with respect. And it goes all the way back to what we always talk about, is that we're a team, and that if we don't have each other, we have nobody. So there you go. Hey, that Hammond organ solo in the background tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and numerous other podcast sites. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk fun.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast.
But just in case, if you choose to litigate us, our law firm of Mr. Fleck, Miss Flock, Flair, and Glare, and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Lone Star State.
And be sure to tune in next week when we discuss waterproof moving lights, summer fun gigs, techniques for taking photos and videos of your work, and staying alive when your gigs run out.
All of that and a new sponsor. Light Talk is broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Arrivederci, everybody.
Light Talk.